Hi everybody, I'm going to show you how to create a pivot point on a single object in Unity. And for this demonstration I'm going to use a connecting rod off of a motor. And so what you need to do is create an empty object and zero it out, reset it, and then drag your mesh into that object. And you need to put it in ISO mode. You need to make sure you're in pivot and local. And let me get it centered up here. And right now the pivot is in the middle of the rod. And I want to put it right here so it pivots right there. So let me put that back. And now I need to fire up CrossWork. And let's see, I don't need the zoom boxes, I don't need the fonts, I don't need the crosshairs, I need the grid, I don't need the ruler, I don't need the circles, and the picture, I don't need that either. Okay, so what I want to do is put the top of the grid right there. This is actually just a reference. And then I'm going to go ahead and shorten it up a little bit here. Right there. And now I'm going to move the rod up to right there. And go to game object, and now the pivot is where I want it. And after you do that, you can go ahead and what I do is I go rod piv, and that way I know it's a pivot point. It's a rod, but it's the pivot to a rod because the rod has to be the child to it. So it's a little bit confusing, but you get used to it. And so now the pivot point is where I want it to be. And there is an alternative way to do that. Hi everybody, I'm going to show you how to create a pivot point object in Unity using CrossWork. And what it is meshes that are imported into Unity, the pivot points set in them. And so you need to move the mesh into another object, and wherever you place it within that object, that object's pivot point is how you will have to manipulate pivot points in Unity. And I'm going to use CrossWork to show an easy way to get around that. And so first thing I want to do is get my notes up, and then I'm going to fire up a copy of CrossWork. Okay, and first thing I want to do is set my notes transparent, because I want to be able to see them and still be able to work. And you can control that transparency, and I want it right about there. And now when I click here, now it's click through. Now I'm working in Unity. And so let's see, okay, I want the front, and let me turn this down a little bit, move that, put this over here. Okay, first thing you want to do is set the pivot, set the editor to pivot and local. So up here, go to pivot and local and set those to pivot and local. And then set it to ISO view. So I set it to ISO view, and then zoom it up a little bit. And now find the mesh that you want to create a pivot point for. In this case, it's going to be a rod inside the engine here. In fact, let me I'll show you exactly what it is. Okay, it's that rod, and its pivot point is in the middle, and I want to put it down here where it pivots like a rod would. So let me put everything back here, switch back to ISO view. Hold on, where's my, did it? Okay. Okay. Okay, so now switch to ISO view, find the mesh, and copy the component values. So there's the mesh, and I'm going to copy the component values. Copy component. Now create an empty object, and I will do that at the top here. Create empty, and now paste the component values into the empty object. Okay, now drag mesh, the mesh that you want to pivot, into the empty object. Okay, and it was a prefab, but in this case it doesn't matter to me because I don't needed the prefab anymore. Okay, and select the protractor tool, which is, it's already selected, but I want to get rid of the grid, I want to get rid of the ruler, and now for the protractor tool I want it to be a full 360 degrees. And now position the CrossWork where you want the pivot. So this is the 0 position of CrossWork, and so I'll set it right there. And I usually do this because this helps me get it lined up a little bit better, and also I get a measurement of the part there. In fact, I'm going to get a little bit closer here. Okay, and yep, getting it centered up here. Okay, now, and that'll give you also the size of your part, and there's its radius right there, and this would be its diameter. Its radius is 63. So anyways, what you need to do now is size this to the pivot point right there that's currently in the mesh, and now move the mesh up to that part, up to right there where it was. And what CrossWork is helping me do here is remember where the pivot was. It was right there. And so now you go to your empty object, and its pivot is right there. Okay, now move the mesh from the center point to the outer circumference. Okay, that's what we did. I'm sorry, I didn't go by the notes. And now move the empty object back where the mesh was, and that would be right. My mouse is fast. Anyways, okay, that's kind of there. If you remember the values that you moved it, the offset of the X and the Y, and then you subtract that, you can put it back exactly where you want. And I do have a calculator that set up to do that later. Okay, anyways. And so now your pivot point is right where it should be. It's right where I want it. And so just to validate that, verify it, I'll go back to ISO view or perspective view. Zoom it out a little bit. Move the rod out, and it pivots at the lower rod end where I want it to. And so now I'll go ahead and undo the notepad, and that is how you create a pivot point much easier using CrossWork. Thank you very much.